Apologies from the Chairman, Brendan Smith, hence I'm in the chair, from Seán Crowe, Noel Grealish and Niall Collins. And then I just have to read the formalities. Mobile phones. Before proceeding to the business, I have to remind members and those in the public gallery that the mobile phone should be switched off completely for the duration of the meeting, as they cause interference, even if on silent mode, with the recording equipment in the committee rooms. So the purpose of today's meeting is to consider the motion referred to the Select Committee by Dáil Éireann in relation to approving the terms of the Enhanced Partnership and Cooperation Agreement between the European Union and its member states of the one part and the Republic of Kazakhstan. Under the terms of the Dáil motion of the 25th of September 2018, the committee must consider the matter and, having done so, report back to the Dáil not later than the 23rd of October 2018, that being today. So on behalf of the Select Committee, I welcome you, Minister McEntee, and the officials to today's meeting. So the format is we'll have the opening statement from the Minister and then take questions, comments from the members. So I call on the Minister now.
Thank you, Deputy Sullivan Cahirlock. I want to thank the Chair and members of the Select Committee for giving me the opportunity today to discuss the motion referred to the Select Committee for consideration. The motion which Dáil Éireann has been asked to approve is as follows: that Dáil Éireann approves the term of the Enhanced Partnership and Cooperation Agreement between the European Union and its Member States of the one part and the Republic of Kazakhstan of the other part, signed at Astana on the 21st of December 2015, a copy of which has been laid before the Dáil on the 6th of July this year, 2018. This agreement is the first of a new generation of cooperation agreements between the European Union and the former Soviet states of Central Asia. It is intended to provide a framework for strengthening the bilateral relationship between the EU and Kazakhstan. In addition to facilitating stronger economic relations, this agreement aims to enhance political dialogue and to promote peace and stability. At its core is a commitment to strengthen the promotion, protection and implementation of fundamental freedoms, of human rights and the respect for democratic principles, the rule of law and good governance. The agreement provides for a comprehensive dialogue between the EU and Kazakhstan and cooperation in a wide range of areas such as trade, justice, economic and financial cooperation, energy, environment and climate change, culture, education and research. The agreement provides for the provisional application of certain aspects that fall under the EU competence until such time as all EU member states ratify the agreement and until they come into force. The agreement has been applied provisionally since the 1st of April 2016, and this is mainly in the area of trade and economic cooperation. Madam Chairperson, since gaining independence, Kazakhstan has become an increasingly important partner in the promotion of peace and security, regionally and internationally. It is currently a non-permanent member of the UN Security Council and previously served on the UN Human Rights Council from 2012 to 2015. Ireland has worked well with Kazakhstan at a multilateral level. When Kazakhstan was the chair in office of the Organisation for Security and Cooperation in Europe in 2010, Ireland served as the chair of the Forum for Security Cooperation. Kazakhstan continues to play a prominent role in the OSCE as the chair of the economic and the environmental dimension. Ireland formally recognised Kazakhstan as an independent state in 1991, following which diplomatic relations were established. Our embassy in Moscow is accredited on a secondary basis, and although we do not have a large footprint in Central Asia, several Irish companies have an established presence in Kazakhstan. Bilateral trade consists mainly of Irish exports to Kazakhstan. In 2017, our total exports amounted to 34 million and total imports 450,000. A double taxation agreement between Ireland and Kazakhstan entered into force in December 2017. This will allow Ireland to develop greater opportunities for trade and investment with Kazakhstan, including in the education and the agricultural sectors. Madam Chairperson, it is important to acknowledge concerns about the challenging human rights environment in Kazakhstan. Ireland, together with the EU and our fellow Member States, continues to encourage reform within Kazakhstan, particularly in the areas of the rule of law, freedom of expression or belief and human rights. The EU and Kazakhstan have an annual dialogue in the area of human rights, and this agreement provides for further engagement in this extremely important area. Encouraging steps have been taken by Kazakhstan. This includes on the reform of the penal system and greater participation of civil society in policy decision-making. This agreement specifically provides for cooperation on civil society to allow for more engagement between the EU and Kazakhstan in this area and to encourage the active participation of civil society, particularly in the areas of economic, social and political cooperation. In conclusion, I want to thank the committee for the opportunity to present this motion here today. This agreement will not only broaden and deepen the EU's relationship with Kazakhstan and provide for closer economic and political ties, but it will also provide the framework for further constructive dialogue on human rights. I hope the committee will support the motion and that Dáil Éireann may approve the terms of this agreement so that Ireland may proceed to ratification in the very near future. And I'm happy to take questions at this point.
Thank you very much, Minister. So I'll open it to the two members who want to ask questions, and then I have some myself. So, Deputy Barrett.
Yep. I wanted to thank the Minister for her presentation. I think places like Kazakhstan are important, not alone in trade terms, but also in our contact with that part of the world. And I think we have to think beyond the pale when we look at what's going to happen with Britain exiting the EU. And I think we have to be very conscious that we're going to end up as an island nation stuck out in the Atlantic with no near neighbour who is a member of the European Union. And I'd be very fearful that, you know, it's very easy to be forgotten if you're not terribly involved on a regular basis. And the contact with Britain through various means was of great advantage, you know, in terms of people looking to this part of Europe. So I think a friendship with Kazakhstan, not that there'll be a great deal of trade initially, but I mean, we're in one end and they're in the other end. So I came along today to support the Minister and the proposal before us, but also to point out that at every opportunity we have to make aware publicly that we have a bigger task on our shoulders now, that with the prospect of Britain exiting the EU. And I don't think there has been enough discussion within this country as to what's going to happen. We're all sort of gobsmacked, at least I am. I don't speak for other people. That gobsmacked that, you know, there's such a hullabaloo about Britain's exit that we've forgotten where we're going to stand into the future. And also, the fact that part of this island will not be in the EU either. So these are very, very serious issues, and they're very serious issues for this committee that we should highlight and get people thinking as to how we're going to improve our contact with other parts of Europe. And I think, I'm not exaggerating, but everybody knows, and particularly people of our vintage, if you don't mind me saying so, okay, here, look, you know, we've been around a long time, and it is a fact, you know, before Ireland really got into the EU, like we were stuck out there, and we were a small, undeveloped country. And I don't want to see anything happening as a result of Britain's exit that the same could happen again. And so we need to make contact and be conscious of our need to become part and parcel of welcoming the likes of Kazakhstan in as a member into the whole trade situation, and also to think, looking ahead, what way we're going to deal with the situation we're going to be faced with. And I just want to say, I think it would be important that maybe at some early date, as a committee, we should have a general discussion as to where we think we're going with the exit of Britain, and not be hanging around. I'm not suggesting that we are, but not to be hanging around waiting for it to happen, because the way things are going there, you wouldn't know what's going to happen. But so I think it's vitally important that we keep up to date and keep Ireland's future out there in red lights. Thank you. Thank
you, Deputy Barrett. Deputy Snodaigh.
Yeah, on a different vein, and something that I've raised here on a number of occasions in relation to other EU trade agreements and neighbourhood agreements is the question of the human rights record of a country which is basically receiving, if these are passed, supports from the EU and endorsements, because that's how they're used, endorsements of a regime. And I note what you said in relation to changes or improvements in the human rights regime in Kazakhstan. They're very minor in the context of the abuses in that country. I also am aware of the funding that the EU has given in the past. The project was Enhancing Criminal Justice in Kazakhstan, and it also co-founded support to the Kazakh authorities in improving the quality and efficiency of the Kazakh justice system. But the human rights workers there and the international ones who have looked at these reports have said that the officially presented outcome do not in any way correspond with reality, and that reality includes only earlier this month or this year 140 participants at peaceful protests in May and in June being prosecuted and persecuted for attending those rallies, and also that one of the key human rights defender, Ilana Semenova, was banned from leaving the country to raise these issues at an international parliamentary assembly. That's not the actions of a country that is embracing fully the human rights conditions that the EU has set in the past. So the question is, do you think that the EU should be withholding funding support to Kazakhstan unless it makes genuine progress in terms of human rights issues rather than implementation of a cooperation agreement? And we know from the past that other cooperation agreements, in particular that with Israel, which has had very strict, or what it looks like very strict, sanctions or suspensions of the agreement if those human rights conditions are breached. And that has never happened. And to date, I don't know of any EU trade agreement that has been suspended due to a breach of the conditions that the EU has set on them, or the protocols that are contained within those. So, Minister, I think it's inappropriate at this stage, or at the very least premature, for us to be signing up to an agreement such as this. And maybe if we withhold it, we would be doing a lot better for the people of Kazakhstan, because the regime there, which has ruled with an iron fist, might be discouraged from human rights abuses in the hope that they could reach the agreement in the future. Because, as I said earlier, if this is signed up to, you then end up with what's seen by the regime as an endorsement, and that they can carry on regardless.
And if I just come in with my own, and then you could take them all together, Minister. I just note that this agreement has been provisional for a couple of years, and that there has been an annual dialogue in the area of human rights. But I also noticed in the whole agreement the various things that the EU has called on the Kazakh government to do about the human rights issue, about the media not having freedom of expression, and it did call for a substantial review of the human rights dialogue in Kazakhstan. Now, I know they have created the civil society consultative platform, but it appears from what's in the document that they're not doing as much as the EU has been calling on them to do. So, do you see any sign of progress at all, following on from what Deputy Snodaigh said? I note also that it seems to be of more benefit to Ireland than to Kazakhstan when we look at the figures. So therefore there's Irish trade going on. And again, I just ask about engagement with the Irish companies who are in Kazakhstan. I mean, are they at least providing the example of workers' rights and proper conditions for workers there? And the other question is, there are some other countries in the EU have not ratified, and are they conveying why they haven't ratified? Have they got the same issues that we have? So I'll call on the Minister now when she's ready to.
Thank you, Cahill, and thank you for the comments and indeed questions. Firstly, maybe to touch on Deputy Barrett's comments, I think you're right in saying that we need to look further afield, and I think if anything Brexit has highlighted the fact that we sometimes do rely on our neighbours more than we thought we did, and certainly while our closest neighbours within the European Union will continue to be our largest market, we have an access to over 500 million people, we need to continue to engage even further afield, and so working with our EU colleagues to develop not just this partnership but other partnerships and cooperation agreements is extremely important, particularly in the Asia and Central Asia route and Pacific, and we have our own Asia Pacific organisation here which is chaired by our former colleague Alan Dukes, which is doing a huge amount of work to create those links and strengthen those ties and areas of cooperation already in existence. Of course, then as well we have this year launched Global Ireland 2025, which is a plan and a roadmap to double our global footprint by 2025, which is not just again looking at Europe, it's looking at North America, South America, Asia and Africa as well as that. So I think while obviously Brexit is not something that we wanted to happen, it certainly has opened our eyes, and I think particularly placed a focus on the need to strengthen the relationships and to build new relationships elsewhere, and this is very much part of this. I think in terms of funding and the support that we've already given, obviously there is a provisional agreement in place before the overall ratification, and we are one of 5 countries still left to ratify. I'm not able to maybe answer the question in terms of why the other 4 haven't yet, but I do know maybe in previous times we have been one of 2 or 3, so we're not the last to ratify at this time. But I mean, the funding overall, when you look at it, we've had 350 projects funded since the country became independent in 91. That's a figure of 180 million over 27 years. So when you spread that out, it's not really a huge amount of funding. At the same time, that funding has gone into strengthening the capacity of their own regional and local governments. It's gone into supporting reform of the justice sector. You have improving the capacity of the public sector to try and introduce social and economic reforms. So while it's a minimal amount, I think taking that money away would actually do more harm than good. And in terms of the ratification and delaying it or not letting that happen, by ratifying the agreement, we can influence Kazakhstan from within the ring, and we can work with the leaders, but also the people on the ground in civil society, whereas if we don't ratify the agreement, we can only observe from the outside and watch while other countries, while other states, while other unions work with them. I think if you look at the agreement, it covers a number of key areas that we want to work on, and as well to include the framework for trade, because the framework for trade can very much be used as a mechanism to address a lot of the human rights issues, but other areas to be covered include people-to-people relations, civil society cooperation, we have cooperation in education and culture, research and innovation, and I think the more that we engage on all of these various different levels, the more that we can encourage reform at those various different levels, and the more we can do that from the inside. We also, as you have mentioned, Chairman, we engage with human rights issues, not just through the European Union, but through the Council of Europe and through the OSCE, and we have that regular dialogue. And I think having this agreement, it only enhances those dialogues. It allows us to continue to highlight, and from an Irish point of view, we do and have done on a number of occasions highlight the fact that there is still a threat of radicalisation, there is still a threat of violent extremism in Kazakhstan. This has meant that there has been a significant threat to civil society and violation of a number of fundamental human rights, as you've outlined. So again, by engaging on not just economic terms, but in terms of education, in terms of culture, in terms of people-to-people strengthening and relations, then we can actually try and deal with a lot of these issues. So, you know, the funding piece, I think it would be foolish to stop funding them, particularly given the fact that these projects are focused on people, they're focused on human rights, they're focused on democracy and the rule of law, and they're obviously the key fundamentals to the European Union. Your second question, Chairman, in terms of benefits and how will this benefit, it's beneficial for Ireland and for the rest of the European Union to have a closer relationship, to have a closer partnership, but also closer integration for Kazakhstan will benefit them as well. We know that the European Union is their largest trading partner at the moment, and obviously the further we engage, then the larger that will become, and the more support that we can provide them. Some of the areas, again, in the agreement are in terms of energy cooperation, in terms of transport and environment. We have areas focusing on public health, on consumer protection, on education, training, youth and cultural cooperation. And in terms of where they will benefit in all of these, it will help to have better quality products. The focus is on more business, a better functioning of the judiciary, which in turn will help the citizens as well, strengthening of the rule of law and enhanced transparency as well. So I suppose it's beneficial for both sides, but the more that we work with them, the more that we are included in the fold, the more work that we can do to support them.
Thank you. Deputy Snodaigh, Deputy Barrett.
Yeah, I understand all of that, and we've had this debate around quite a number of countries that the EU and, if you want, the developed world often encourages countries who are looking towards democratisation, but who sometimes have a harsh regime. And the EU often encourages them or bribes them, whichever way you want to see it. If you tackle this list of human rights abuses, if you have more transparent elections, then we can kind of trade with you. We can endorse you, we can have a trade agreement. And this falls under that same category. And that's not a bad thing if you get product. The problem is that, looking from the outside, because that's what we're doing, I haven't been to Kazakhstan, all we can do is depend on those we often trust, that we've heard kind of in different occasions who've come before committees here, who have told us that in various examples that regimes that we have had trade agreements with have basically, once it's signed, have flaunted the human rights conditions that the EU have set. So one of the questions, if you want, and it's probably a hypothetical and I don't know whether you can answer it, has there been any EU trade agreement which has been suspended because of human rights abuses? I know kind of in the early years of this century, kind of every single year, kind of we argued here in the in Foreign Affairs Committee or in the EU Committee about suspending the Israeli, the Euromed treatment on the very same principles that you have contained here, is that kind of the trade will be tied to improvements in human rights, and that never seems to happen despite very blatant human rights abuses. And I'm afraid, and many are afraid, that if we sign up to the likes of what we have before us today, that the same will happen in that case. I'm firmly of the belief sometimes if you dangle the carrot of an EU trade agreement in front of some countries, they will keep moving towards the goal if it's dangling there, but once you sign it, that they ignore it, and that's my belief in terms of this one.
And yes, Deputy.
I think one of the most important points that's raised in the papers before us is point 13, calls on the EU to consistently prioritise in its political dialogue with Kazakhstan the issues of the rule of law and democracy, fundamental freedoms and human rights. Now, you know, this is, the more you get involved and pursue that sort of a programme through the EU, the more chance you have of going to get the changes that you're looking for. I mean, if you eventually give people the two fingers, they'll walk away. And, you know, I think Ireland, as a small, independent country, can do an awful lot more by being in the tent and trying to change people. And the more we mix with business people in Kazakhstan and other places like it, the more chance we have of influencing. And, you know, we can't go on forever. You know, I think everybody is very conscious of the need for changes to be made, and it's recognised in the papers that are here before us. And I think we should ask the Minister to make certain that the EU keep an eye on this, and that, you know, we're endorsing this on the basis that should happen.
And I think that brings me back to the point I made about the Irish companies who are trading in Kazakhstan, that they could be there leading by example, and if the department or the Department of Trade, Business, has any engagement with them. I mean, it was a long time coming, the report on business and human rights, but it did come, and we should be implementing what the report is recommending for Irish business abroad.
Absolutely, and maybe just to answer the question in terms of has funding or have supports been stopped at any stage, not that I'm aware of. We do know that there are obviously sanctions on Turkey and Russia at the moment, but even throughout all of that, and even with sanctions, we have always looked and continue to engage with countries, and I suppose that's very much on the basis that the European Union was established and developed through dialogue and is underpinned by the key fundamental rights of democracy, human rights, the freedom of expression, the rule of law, and so any engagement that we have, it's underpinned by those core values. But, you know, to be able to work with countries and to be able to work with them to impose or not to impose, to incorporate those rights as part of their overall agenda, we need to be around the table with them, we need to be engaging with them, we need to be talking to them. And as I said, the figure of 180 million over 27 years, it is a small amount, but I think it is a significant gesture that we do want to work with them, and that it's important that the funding that is provided goes directly to the source, to the people that it's meant for. And I think that's the manner in which the EU has always operated and will continue to operate. But certainly from my own point of view and working with my own colleagues around the European table, these issues will be raised, I think, and are continuously raised at every committee meeting that we have in terms of human rights and how to address the situation. But again, I would stress we're much better within the fold than outside looking in, and I think that's the best way to move forward.
Okay. Anything else?
I would have more faith in it, kind of, if we had occasions where the trade agreements were suspended, because suspension doesn't mean ending. It means kind of until you get your act in order. And even kind of, as Debbie Barrett referred to the document, in the document, and when you read through it, it points out some of the failures which are not acceptable. So one of them in 20, it asked for an end to be put to judicial persecution, harassment and imprisonment of independent journalists. And these are issues we're asking them to do. What if they don't? And do we just say, well, we have an agreement in place and maybe they might if we don't, if we ask them nicely. So if this is passed, kind of, it doesn't come back up for review. And as I said, kind of the call for some of these to be suspended over time hasn't been heeded, because if Ireland called for it, it doesn't necessarily mean that the EU 27 or 28 will listen. This is an agreement between the EU. So in some ways it goes out of our hands once we've signed it. It's not in our gift to automatically suspend it. If it was a bilateral, then we could have the parliamentary debate, we could have a greater influence. So it's a caution that I have, and I've had in relation to quite a number of these the agreements, and I don't think at this stage I can vote for it.
Well, that's all been noted, Deputy Snodaigh, but all we can do as a Select Committee is to consider and report. So I need to bring the meeting to a conclusion, and I thank Minister McEntee for engaging with us with the exchanges that we had. So in accordance with Standing Order 90, the following message will be sent to the Clerk of the Dáil that the Select Committee on Foreign Affairs, Trade and Defence has completed its consideration of the following motion, that Dáil Éireann approves the terms of the Framework Agreement on Partnership and Cooperation between the EU and its Member States of the one part and the Republic of Kazakhstan on the other part. And the Select Committee is adjourned sine die. So thank you very much, Minister, and thanks the members.